Appreciate the introduction. I'm so happy to be in a room with people who love music and who are involved in creating policy around music and in support of musicians. We love music. This is a music city and a music region, and it's also an economically hard place to live and create here. It's expensive. But there are some things that we are trying to do here to make that better. Some of it's working really well. We want to share that out. Some of it needs some more thought and some more investment. We have the good fortune today of having 3 incredible musicians who are willing to share their experiences with folks who may not have a real sense of what it's like to be a musician day to day. It may seem like a group of people who just create freely somewhere in a garage and then get on stage and make it happen for people. But I think there's a bit of a contrast between what it really feels like on the day-to-day to be a musician and what people think. And we get a chance to make that connection today. I'm going to start by having each of you lovely folks, though, just say your names, say the band you're in, or band, and also say how you make a living, if that's different, or in addition to what you do as a performer. You want to start that?
Okay, I'll start. My name is Melvin Gibbs. Thank you. And these days, well, the last 2 things I did was I did a solo show at Big Ears, and then the week after that, I was in Holland with a new band called Body Meta. So those are the last 2 things that I've done. But there's a whole bunch of other things. If you actually care about that, you could look it up. How do I make a living? Well, it's interesting because I'm probably close to a pure musician. But even in the last couple of years, I'm actually in the second round of editing of a book that I wrote. So that's the side hustle right now. So those are the 2 main ones for me.
I'm Molly Sides, and I have a band based in Seattle called Thunder Pussy. And cool. I also am working on another project as well. And how do I make a living? It's a good question. I ask myself that every day. No, I'm a birth, postpartum, death, and bereavement doula as well. That's been pretty incredible to be a part of and witness. I think I juggle many things. I teach, I move and groove is kind of what I do. But yeah, that's about it.
Hi, I'm Gio, aka Prometheus Brown, formerly known as Geologic. I think most of y'all know me, if you do, from my work with the group Blue Scholars with my partner DJ Sabzi. And word, thank you. And more recently have joined the KEXP crew, so I'm one of the 40 plus DJs, currently a fill-in DJ there. I'll be in tonight, filling in for Stasty Bass on Street Sounds. And in between being a DJ, actually I started off as a DJ before I rap, so this is kind of like a full circle thing for me to be doing this more recently. But I also run Hood Famous Bake Shop in the Chinatown International District with my wife Shara. And if you're in music, do not open a restaurant. But we're lucky that we're even still around, and we got a great team and good community support. But similarly, I think I do a bunch of stuff. I'll do some teaching here and there. I'm doing more and more DJ gigs. I'll do a little contract to write text panels for a museum. Just anything that I can in between projects.
Excellent. So there's a lot of juggling going on, on all levels. Molly, maybe you can start with this. When you were starting out, what did creating music and paying the rent look like then, and how does it contrast to now?
No, that's a really good question. Oh, that's interesting. I think when we first started the band and we were all playing in different bands, it really came from a place of gathering and laughter. You know, we kind of started it as a joke in many ways, or like to joke with each other while creating sonically, you know. And at that time, I think I had 4 jobs. I was a barista, I was making crepes, I was teaching and studying, and I was also in a dance company actually at that time, kind of coming between Portland and Seattle, and a company called Teeth, which was awesome. But now I think I've become more creative with the ways in which I'm juggling things and becoming more monetarily smart. I'm smarter about those jobs that I'm saying yes to, whereas before, I think that's the difference. I would say yes to everything to make a dime. And now I think I'm learning a stronger no, but still juggling different things, but not as many. Yeah.
Gio, what about you?
When I first got started, I think similarly, I was doing like 3-4 different things, including, you know, telemarketing this was like the late 90s, early 2000s to interning at different .coms during the .com era. Amazon.com was one of them, you know. It's wild to think if I would have stayed there and just got those stock options back in like 2000. I'm still trying to figure it out, to be honest. Yeah.
What about you, Melvin?
What was the question again?
I knew you were going to do it. What were you doing at the start of your career? Like, what were you juggling at the beginning that was sort of making music and paying the rent? What that look like for you?
See, I'm the veteran up here. In New York, in the beginning, once I kind of hit a kind of critical mass, I was just doing music.
Yeah.
And then you're figuring out it's time management, because those were the days, like, literally be a 12-hour day, like 2 rehearsals or 3 rehearsals and a gig or whatever. So there was that all day, and then you generate a cycle, and then, you know, as you do it, then you get a set of responsibilities that requires you to hit a certain nut, and then at a certain point, a tour got canceled, and then I had to at that point I had to take a job because I had a bunch of stuff that had to be paid. So I worked at Tower Records for 4 or 5 years. Was it 4 or 5 years? No, it was 2.5 years. Worked at Tower Records 2.5 years, eventually became the world music buyer. And I was doing that while I was playing music, and then everything kind of righted itself, and I stopped working retail and went back to just playing music again.
Just out of curiosity, did anyone have health insurance during that time?
No.
At Tower, I had health insurance. Yeah.
Tower.
Yeah.
Peace.
Well, that tells you how long ago that was.
So true. Gio, we talked about this a little bit when you and I spoke earlier today, but oftentimes people don't think musicians need to have, or at least they don't have, a certain kind of financial literacy that is useful to them in running their own businesses or determining who is going to help them run their business.
Right.
Where have you found that kind of help, and what do you wish was in place for you earlier that might have changed any of your decisions around business and music?
I'm also still trying to figure this out, but I got...
Join us. We all are.
Yeah. No, it's one of those things that I think the generation that we come from, we might have been part of that, you know, we're the cohort now looking back where we're like, oh, money? And come on, like, I'm not doing this for the money. Yeah. And to kind of use that as an excuse to be like, nah, I'm not gonna learn this world of, money management, investing, whatnot. I'm gonna leave that to whoever on my team, if you get to that point where it's somebody else's job. So whatever financial literacy I got, I was getting from our own managers and accountants and folks like that, which, like I was telling you, I'm not sure if that's the best people to learn from, people who are making money off of you. But along the way, I think I got lucky because I had friends who actually went into that world, and then once they had like 5-10 years experience in that field, approached me and asked, hey, have you thought about your retirement account and things like that? And it was at that point that I was ready to hear it, because I was hearing this stuff early on, but like I said, it felt like, I was like, I'm a musician. This ain't, when keeping it real goes wrong, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, understood. Melvin, what about you on that front?
Well, that's kind of a two-level conversation.
Let's go both.
Because on one level, on the idea of how to actually make money doing music, I had a bunch of very good mentors. And from the crew of people I came up with in the situation I grew up in, it was expected. I mean, you had to figure out how to make money. So there were a bunch of guys there who had already been successful, and they kind of guided me and my friends. And if anything was expected, as I'm going to say it this way, as a black musician, I'm from the generation where if you were black, it was expected that you had to be the best. So my musical mentors made sure that we were all the best. And the people on the business side explained to us the pitfalls, and explained to us what publishing was, and how to, if you're going to do union gigs, how all of that kind of stuff. Having said that, the next level of like, okay, how do you become a bourgeois or whatever, and buy a house and all of that stuff? That was not part of the conversation. Which later on, when you're talking about stuff like retirement accounts and stuff like that, that was a different conversation that wasn't had. So that's why I say it's a two-level conversation.
Yep. It sounds like you had the benefit of some really good mentors who were at least helping you understand the business part of the music that you were making.
Yeah,
correct?
and it's also a question of the shark aspect. It's a bunch of things. I mean, if you're coming from a situation where you don't have something, then the option of not getting something is taken off the table at that point. So it's not like you can do the music for love if you gotta figure it out.
Yep.
Plus, it was a lot of what I call ghetto entrepreneurship. So the idea was that money had to be made, so everybody was making money in their own particular way, and that was just part of what it was.
Molly, we talked about this a little bit yesterday in terms of, I think you said something along the lines, I'm sorry if I'm misquoting you, of I thought it was going to be enough just to know how to do the music part of it and the recording and the touring and the performing, but I also have had to learn how to be a social media expert, a new technology expert. I have to understand taxes. Someone just told me I should start a Roth IRA. There are other things to think about. What does that look like for you? What are you into right now? What are you learning right now that you want younger musicians to know about?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, first, I wanted to go back really quickly about the financial part, because I think growing up, the conversation around money was a bit taboo. Like, there was no transparency around numbers and money. And then also when I went to school for dance, and I'm going to be a dancer, and like the creative brain is turned on. And same thing when we started the band and we were all playing music already. I mean, you want to create, you want to just send that energy out there, like that is the focus. And then when all of a sudden it shifts, your focus shifts. Now we're not a band, we're creating a brand and we're a business. Now I have to be better about understanding the business side, the taxes, my favorite. And I feel like every time we have conversations, there's something new to learn. Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know we had to create these 3 other networks. But my strength does not lie in technology and social media. It is not a place that I find joy and excitement. It's not a place that I like to spend time in. So for me, it's so important that somebody else does it. But that has been a struggle in, in our band. Because it's also hard for me sometimes to ask the questions or know the right questions to ask. I think right now, to answer your question, it would be like kind of creating a map and filling it in, like a color wheel. Your strengths, your weaknesses, the in-betweens, and the questions that come up and who to turn to. Mm-hmm. And that also evolves and it changes based on different experiences of falter and, and failure. And I think those are also extremely important because you don't know unless you take the risk of asking or trying on a new team and it doesn't work and that was a big mistake. You learn from it. Now I know what I don't want, what's not working for the team. So I think that, did I answer your question?
I appreciate that so much. And also just the, coming up in families that, or in situations where we didn't understand, we just weren't talking about certain aspects of finance. And those who were talking to us about it, we talked about this earlier, we were like, I don't know if I should listen to them. Either we sort of thought they were like square and not living in the way that we thought we wanted to live, mm-hmm. or we didn't necessarily trust their motives. But some of us were without even the questions to ask, even if we could find the right people to answer them. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that, Gio? I know we went down that road today.
Yeah, just like you said, early on, I definitely had people who were trying to talk about money management, financial literacy, investing early, just put aside 5%, 10% of whatever you money make to the side and let that compound interest do its thing and you'll be rich in 20 years. And to think that if I would have actually done that, if I would have, all the times I would have put $50 away, 20 years ago, I could pay rent each time I did that. It's wild to think, but like you said, there's a lot of trust that has to be cultivated to even be comfortable to talk about money, and that just wasn't there with a lot of people who were coming into my orbit wanting to have these conversations, especially as we were doing things as, going on tour, selling merch, and at least on the surface looking oh wow, there's some money there to, let me go over there and try to talk to them about money. And yeah, I just didn't trust none of these folks. But looking back, I think some of them genuinely wanted to just offer some advice, offer some mentorship, and I do wish I was a little bit more receptive to it.
I'm going to switch us a little bit. It's pretty common for us to use the term ecosystem, and we use it to evoke sort of, this system that's sort of taking care of each other and itself in a nurturing, beautiful kind of way. That's how I think about it. I often use it in that way. When I was talking earlier to Melvin, you had a different take on that term, ecosystem, what it kind of means and what it's not including when it's being used. And I wonder if you want to share your thoughts on that with this crew.
Yeah, I do. But before I go, to start off, I want to say that I actually heard a use of it in the last panel that I was actually very happy with. It's with Kevin Soar, the way he used it. I was kind of okay, if you're going to use the term in that way, yes, you need to think about what's feeding you and how to maintain that. But I think my problem with it is that it puts this natural metaphor on something that's constructed by humans, and often frames things that are changeable as something that's immutable. And it often frames things that happen that shouldn't necessarily happen as the natural flow of things. And I kind of, that's why I tend to push back on that. I think that, I can't even find my notes now, they're on the phone somewhere. But I think in terms of how we're operating, we have, you know, the other way of looking at it is the idea, the other metaphor is the blind man and the elephant. I mean, everybody's right in terms of what music business, part of the music business they're touching. They're right in terms of what's working in their section. But it's also a question of, this thing you're touching is a very small facet of this larger thing that has to work together. And what can often happen is if you're maximizing what works for your little piece, you're gonna mess up the other pieces. So that's why when I question that term, that's the context for questioning that term.
I really appreciated it. That was a really helpful. Thanks for speaking that into the room. We talked a little bit about the way technology is just barreling down the road at us. I don't know if we're going to make it. But you've thought and advocated at various phases throughout the last 20 or so years around technology. We spoke a little bit about this notion for some of us who are older in the room, some Gen Xers, I'll speak of myself, who at one point kind of imagined that this thing called the internet was just going to free everything up and make it all so equal. I know that's naive, but I was 20. So you've given that some thought. You've seen the way in which that opened some things up and closed it back down. Where do you see, who are the gatekeepers now? And what do you think that enemy that we thought we kind of got rid of was replaced by something more challenging?
Yeah. I mean, so, the bigger context for this was I was the head of an artist right group probably about 10 years ago now. And I had a particular spiel that I used to give back then that unfortunately has not become obsolete in the least. So I'm just going to pick that spiel right back up again. Go. As if the 10 years haven't passed. And this idea, first of all, I want to, the same way I push back on the idea of the ecosystem, I want to push back on the idea of gatekeepers, especially because there's somebody in the room right now who is, in addition to all the other promoters that we've already spoken, who's been very supportive, you know, of music in general, and of music I've been involved with, a particularly band named Harriet Tubman, a man named John Gilbreth is here, who's a longtime KEXP man. And I just want to say that he would be framed as a gatekeeper because he was making choices. So to the extent that people like him have less power, I think that's a bad thing and not a good thing. Yeah. And I would also say that this idea that the gatekeepers have disappeared is just patently false because there is a new gatekeeper now, except the new gatekeeper is now a mathematical equation. It's the algorithm. You know, so, and you can't even have a conversation with the algorithm. I mean, and you can see the whole structure of the music business has changed. Now everybody's chasing virality, everybody's chasing mass, everybody's chasing all of these things. But because we're using this weird natural metaphor that it's an ecosystem, we think that's just what's supposed to happen. So again, I think that again, that's the context for saying that.
Appreciate that. Yeah. Gio, how's technology showing up in your music and world right now?
Similarly, the algorithm is definitely the thing that we're up against, especially at this point of its evolution. A lot of this stuff was like deployed around 10 years ago, and we've seen it. We've seen what it does in terms of social media, in terms of what music gets put out there, what rises to the top, what gets left at the bottom. And I think at one point, I used to be on some like, kick down this whole gatekeeper thing. And I've come around to realize that gatekeepers are just human beings, and that there were definitely those that weren't doing it in the spirit of trying to pass knowledge on, and there were those that were, and those were the ones that I look back on who played such a big role, particularly in our local hip hop community. I think there are definitely like key people that when I was younger, I was looking up to, and I was like, oh man, like what do I got to do to get the respect? And if I wasn't getting it, I was feel some kind of way about it, But at the same time, I think there were people who had good intentions that wanted to make sure there was proper mentorship, proper guidance with what to do with that energy, how to operate within a community in a way where you're not stepping on people's toes, and I'm grateful for that. But technology along the way, I feel like has broken more and more of that down. Like the virality thing, the fact that somebody can just not be part of any community, be in their bedroom, make something, and get instantly famous. I hope there's no one in the room that will get offended when I say this, but there's seeing some people that have the numbers, the followers, the streaming numbers. People are talking about them. Then you go see them live, and they fucking suck. Like in the last panel, we were talking about those rooms, those 50-person rooms, those 100-person rooms. We're seeing a whole generation of people who are not doing that. They're making their name known through the internet, and then they come out, they go from URL to IRL, and they can't it doesn't translate, So I've come around to still embracing technology. I think there's a lot of people my age who have been disillusioned, like you said, Gen X, millennial generation, when we saw the internet come about. We saw that early social media, the promise of like connection and bypassing traditional media, all these things that we thought was going to liberate art. And the complete opposite has happened, in my opinion. But I think also, like we're saying, these are human beings that are making this. This isn't something that naturally occurring biologically. These are human beings that are behind these things. And so I think if there are human beings curating alternatives, then I think we'll be all right.
I like that hope. You have something to add to that, Molly?
I was actually just thinking about, the power of showing up. Like, we are artists. We need people. I want to show up. I need people to show up. Like creating an environment, a space that bodies can come through, vessels, spirit vessels can move through and experience something together. Because I think that's such a big issue, is that when internet starts, it can be a tool for connection, but it can also be a distraction of isolation. And I think that the power is in the space that allows individuals to show up, to gather together, to experience something together, and also create a new experience together, and walk out of these doors, those doors, these spaces, feeling something different, or sparking something different. And for me, I don't find that on the internet. I need to experience with people, and we can only do it if we continue to show up, and not hide behind screens.
Thank you for that. Kate or someone, I was just gonna ask. I didn't want us to go late. I want to make sure, most important right now to me is that rarely are artists sharing their experiences directly with policymakers. I just want to invite each of you, since we have 5 minutes left total, is there something that you want surfaced that you feel like is really vital for policymakers to know about what would help you as a musician now or as you're looking forward? That you just want to get on the table because you haven't heard it discussed during this conference, or you've just arrived now and you just want to make sure it gets hit on. You want to start? Yeah, go.
Funding. I also just big shout out to Sonic Guild because, we were also a recipient a few years ago, and Sonic Guild helped us tour and finish our record that took us many years to finish because of funding. And yeah, more of that.
Yeah.
So much. 5 minutes left.
I know.
Especially
It's like 2.
at this point in American history. There's
Sum it up.
Something actually.
Give us some hope.
I mean, I'm going to be honest. There's times where I woke up in the morning and I wonder if music is the most important thing right now. And then I get reminded that it is and it can be. But I feel like a lot of the conversations that we have might tend to be insular, like it's something that the music community has to figure out itself. And I think we're just going to keep going around in circles if we don't link the bodies in this room, the minds in this room, with people from other spaces, other disciplines, so that it's not such an insular, like we can't figure it out. How many doctors are in the room right now? Any lawyers? Probably like 1 or 2. Anybody who knows how to construct a boat? The music community thrives when the policymakers are not just in the insular music community, when they're actually out in the real world, and they can get in the ear of people who can affect change, whether it's in the legislative process or on a community level, in even just maintaining physical spaces. I think that's, I was trying to say something that was relevant to the times, and I don't know if I did, but.
You did good.
Thank you.
I want to jump in and say 2 things. First of all, I want to say, I'm very happy that I came to this conference, and I want to say that all the sharing that was done here is a spark of what Gia was talking about. We have different people from different aspects of what we're doing together, so that it's not just the one piece of the elephant, it's the different pieces of the elephant are talking to each other. And I wanted to say, just as traveling, being in New York last week and Minneapolis a few days ago and now here, the one commonality that I see in all 3 cities is that it's a lot of empty retail space. All 3 cities are probably overbuilt. There's, and we have, this whole change since COVID and the change with people buying online. I think there's some thinking about, we're not in the era of squats or the era where I came up with you just grab a loft, but it's a similar opportunity where there's a lot of empty space, and I think that that's something that needs to be looked at in a good way.
Melvin, thank you so much.
Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you for